Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're in the book of Exodus. We're at the end of the book of Exodus. This is our 12th session, and we are down to our last three chapters.
I don't know why I'm always excited. I'm always excited to get done with the book.
Because that means that next time we get to...
start a new book.
There you go.
Right. But we're going to do a little bit of a recap. Not huge, but if you remember, we started with Jacob's family. 70 people taking into Egypt for safety. So they intentionally went to Egypt. Their son, said, come. He was second in command, and he said, there's going to be a 7-year drought. They had already felt the drought for at least a couple years, 5 more years.
5 years to go.
They're not going to make it. They've already been to Egypt a couple times to get more grain. They're already out of food. So in order to save his own family, Joseph brought everybody, and the Pharaoh at the time not only knew it, he sent a bunch of officials to help bring everything over. So that family, they just flourished. Right now, they were enslaved later by a different Pharaoh who, it said, forgot what Joseph had done for the nation. Which is kind of interesting. And what he was worried about was now there were so many people that this subnation within Egypt could rise up and really overthrow the country.
Well, and in this week's reading, we're not there yet, I know, but we find out sort of what that number looks like, right? There are more than 600,000 army-aged men, and for them, army-aged is 20 years and older. Basically 20 to 60. So if you're younger than 20, you're older than 60, you don't count in that part of the census.
Right.
Well, 600,000.
Right. Add in
just
wives,
that.
Kids, and the rest.
That easily puts us up into the 2 million or more range, right? So so the Pharaoh's sort of concerned. We have these foreigners, 2 million foreigners.
Right.
That...
Right. So that meant they were enslaved, and then later Moses comes about. So we were with Moses. Moses maybe has a false start, has to leave for 20 years, comes back and actually leads everybody out of Egypt. I mean, God's doing all the work here.
So what we said was chapter 1 lasted approximately 300 years. Chapters 2 through 12 lasted about 80 years. And chapters 12 now through 40 have lasted about a year. The chapters get longer and the time gets shorter.
So for the remainder of the book, like you just said, we saw them crossing over the Red Sea. We saw them traveling to Mount Sinai, and we see them just getting ready to leave to make their plot into the promised land. So this is historical events that took place, and I still say this is more of a God story than a human story. Right. So this is God following up on his promise to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, that there will be a promised land. And this is the story of God guiding his people out of the land where they were slaves, protecting his people. We saw him protecting his people. We saw him providing food. We saw him providing water. We see him doing everything for the people, and we see the people rebelling.
Well, he's taking this nation or this group of slaves and forming them into a nation. Right. Which is what he told Abraham he was going to do. But they needed a law code. They needed, some leadership. They needed the whole thing.
Right. Are they even ready to fight yet?
No. They don't even have a standing army. Right. So we've seen really a lot of movement. What seems like we've been stuck for a long time, maybe. Well, they're just sitting at Mount Sinai. Well, there's a lot of stuff going on while they're sitting at Mount Sinai. God's work on them and their work, for God.
What's cool is there's still manna there. Right? I mean, it was a big deal. He hasn't said anything about it.
But
it's just a thing.
Now, we know that they're going to wander around for 40 years. They're not going into the land. But God graciously feeds them every morning with the same stuff, and there's so many different things that you could do with it. I don't think they're going to get bored, but yeah.
Okay, or you have nothing.
Yeah, what else?
And you like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so last week we talked, the last 6 chapters in Exodus are a repeat from chapters 25 through 31 that we've already been through. They're not an exact repeat. Obviously, there's more details. And the first time we heard this, it was Moses in heaven looking at these items that he needs to build: the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, the incense table. There's more. And now what we're seeing in these last 6 chapters, it's actually being built.
Yeah.
Which is way cool.
Yeah.
So last week we saw the building of the tabernacle and some of the artifacts, and we saw the altar was made for the burnt offerings, and we saw everything being made the same way, right? It was acacia wood being formed together. A lot of times it's just a box.
Yeah.
It's just how big, how tall. Sometimes it's open, but then it's covered in gold.
Yeah.
And overlaid, and sometimes there's a fancy top for it. This is also pieces that are going to be carried, so
Yeah.
there are rings put on that a pole can go through, so multiple people can carry these.
I find it, as I was reading through this again, just the reminder, the interesting that, so the Ark of the Covenant is covered with gold, the lampstand is gold, incense, that, but the altar was covered with bronze, right? Well, if you got this fire burning all the time, it's going to hurt the gold. You don't want gold, melting.
Right.
So you need something that's a little bit more stable, that is going to be more heat resistant, the whole thing. And the altar is also further away. The closer you get to the most holy place,
that's exactly what I was going to say too.
The more precious the metal is, the further you get away.
It seems like the bronze is on the outside. There seems to be more silver. I may be making that up, but definitely when you get in the tabernacle, there's gold.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a visual representation of the preciousness the closer you get to God.
Yeah. They also made a large basin of bronze and pedestal of bronze. So the idea is you have an altar. You're going to be sacrificing animals.
Yeah.
1, you need to be clean beforehand. 2, you're going to get dirty, so you need a place to clean up afterwards.
Right.
So in between the altar and the tabernacle, let's put a washroom.
Yeah.
And big basin of water. So I think we have everything in place. The altar for the burnt offering, the wash basin. Last week we got the tabernacle, the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altar, and incense. Then they focused on work of the courtyard. Right, so now we have these pieces, and we know this tabernacle is, going to be this big by this big, but there's also a courtyard around there.
Yeah.
And this courtyard's going to be, what is it? It's 150 feet long, 75 feet wide.
Yeah.
So a rectangle. And there's going to be cloth going all around the outside of it.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't going to keep any bad people out, but the idea is it's separate.
Yeah.
Right. There's a different mindset when you're going to be going in here. Right.
Yeah.
There's going to be more God worship. And privacy.
And there's a front door. You're not coming in the back door. There's one way in, and out. So
right. So they have listed some pretty impressive numbers on the amount of precious material used, and I'm going to confess, I just use your overview, and you translated it into tons, so I'm going with tons there, and I'm going to assume all your numbers are right.
Yeah, well,
so prove us wrong.
Yeah, right. Credit or blame, whichever way you want to go with it.
But almost 2 tons of gold.
Yeah, at least 1 ton. At least gold. 1 ton, probably more than 1 ton. I don't know how close to 2 tons it gets, but yeah.
Almost 4 tons of silver.
Yeah, and I think that's where we see, because there's 29 shekels of gold plus 100 shekels of silver, so it's almost a 4 to 1. Right. So somewhere, yeah,
and then almost 3 tons of bronze.
And again, talents, not shekels. The shekels are the second one. You're right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then bronze. Yep.
And then we also have a marker. At this time, there was 603,550 men who left Egypt.
In that, and when we get to the book of Numbers, it narrows that down, and that's where I get the thing where it's between 20, I think, and 60. It's just the army aged are in here. So there are more men older than that, right? And there are younger men. And children and women and lots and lots of people here.
So now we have really all the things. So now the next step is we need to make the priest's garments, just as the Lord commanded.
Right.
And that statement occurs a lot in these last chapters. And, well, no, we need to remember, right? The nation of Israel sinned.
Yeah.
And God was like, well, I'm going to take them out. Not that he was going to, but it made Moses stand up.
Yep.
And I do give Moses a lot of credit for that. And now this group of people are on their best behavior, right? Hey, we got lucky, we got fortunate, thank God our God is gracious. He certainly could have taken us out. Let's follow what he's asking us to do here. And we even see a part in here where Moses is actually acting as a really good project manager, and he's inspecting all the artifacts that are in there. And in chapter 39, verse 43, it says, Moses inspected all the work, and they had done it just as the Lord had commanded. They had done it exactly, and Moses blessed them.
And it makes sense that Moses would be the one to inspect it. He's already seen the original.
Exactly.
He's received the instructions. He handed down the instructions. He's written the instructions.
Yeah.
There's no one better
Right.
to double check all the work.
Right.
So,
Oh, these are backwards.
Oh.
So on the first day of the first month, it says Moses set up everything.
Yep.
I'm sure that there's some discussion. Is it really Moses? Did Moses set up everything? There's a whole lot of stuff here. And I don't think it really matters if Moses set it up or if it went out to the Levites who were going to set it up and take control.
Well, I think it matches some of the previous chapters where it says Bezalel and Aholiab and these other people, but it kept saying, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this, and he did this. Well, there's no way Bezalel did all of that work, but he did it, right? Because he was the supervisor.
Exactly.
So I think it's the
now we
same
have the
thing
project
here.
manager.
Moses set all this stuff up, really, with his own two hands.
Right.
He was lifting and carrying, the whole thing. No, but he was the one who was overseeing it, and he was the one to make sure that it was done correctly.
Yeah. So again, it's the tabernacle, the ark of the covenant, the table, the lampstand, the golden altar of incense, the altar for burnt offering, which was outside of the tabernacle, and the wash basin, and then the whole courtyard, which would have been the first thing that was set up. And then there was anointments and sanctifications too. And I'm assuming that needed to be done each time they moved it. There was probably a big one that happened first.
Level, there's a level at which everything needs to be made sure that it is proper and correct and purified.
And then verse 17 says, so the tabernacle was set up on the first day of the first month in the second year. So if we go back before when the Exodus happened, I think it was right at Passover time, right? That marked the
Passover,
first. That would have been the first year. Right?
Yeah, so God created a new calendar for them, right? The first day of the first month, and Passover would be the 14th day of the first month, back in Exodus chapter 12.
And that would have been the first year.
The first year.
Right. So now we're at the same date or close to the same date for the second year.
Yeah. So what that means, and this is a great time marker, what that means is they've been out of Egypt for a year now.
Right.
It took about 3 months or so to get to.
So like you say, from chapter
12
or 12 to now,
it's
take a year.
A year. Yeah. Right. It's been a year. So it took about 3 months to get to Sinai. And so now they've been at Sinai for about 9 months. There's a little bit more time that they're going to be here before they move on. But so they finally get everything set up on the first day, or maybe it takes a couple of days. But what that means is that 2 days later, 2 weeks later, 14 days later, they'd be celebrating Passover again.
Right.
And even though this is their second Passover, it's really only their first one out of Egypt.
Right. Well, and the first one where they are going to be putting blood on the horns.
Yeah.
Right. Is that of the Ark of the Covenant?
So the Ark of the Covenant would have been Day of Atonement. Right. So Yom Kippur. So not Passover.
Right.
That will show up. We don't really hear about that here. We don't hear about that until Leviticus. And that was going to be about 6 months later.
Okay. All right. So we end Exodus with a cloud covered the tent of the meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle.
Yep.
How cool is that? I
God
see
is
that as
coming
being,
down.
yep, God is coming down to his house, which really means he accepted,
Yeah.
everything that all the hard work they put into it.
Yep.
In fact, it says Moses was not able to enter it because of the glory.
Yep.
And when the cloud lifted up, the Israelites would set off on their journey.
Yep.
Otherwise, they would stay where they were.
Yep.
And we'll see that, again, not happening in Exodus because we're at the end. But a cloud on the tabernacle by day, fire by night.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool way to end this book.
Yeah, it really is. So there was no question when God said it's time to move on, because
he's already leaving.
he's on his way out, and they're like, oh, okay, tear it apart,
right?
Everybody. And what we find, especially in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, then, is that each family had their job. They knew what they were carrying, what they were doing. It was a system.
Right.
Which tribes are in front, which tribes are in back, on the sides, the whole thing. And when they set up camp, same thing. They're going around it and everything.
So would the Levites have been responsible for the tabernacle, the courtyard?
Yeah.
The others would have been the altar?
Yeah, the priests carried specific things, and then the other Levites carried the rest of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it was split between the three families. There were three families of Levites. Moses and Aaron's family, and then there were two other families, and yeah, it gets into all of that detail later on. But yeah, it's very cool. Really, really cool. A great way to end, like you said. The glory of the Lord is right there at the end. Things are so good. We move into the book of Leviticus, which only takes about 30 days or so. It's about a month that the book of Leviticus takes place in, while they're still at Sinai, before they take off. So that's why I said there's a little bit of time left at Sinai. And then Numbers, and just we just keep going through the thing. Right. So, well, we hope that you have enjoyed our little trek through Exodus here, and really some neat stuff. Yeah, some bad stuff, the golden calf, and all of that. But yeah, God has been protecting them, and literally from the first chapter, God is protecting them from being wiped out, and now in the last chapter, the glory of God is right there protecting them, guiding them, and it's really, really cool bookends. Yeah. To this book. Yeah.
Certainly is.
So if you have questions or comments, make sure you share those, send those in here to us, and we can't pick up here next time, but we'll start a new book when we come back next time.
Yes, we will. Bye, everybody.